When your spouse has committed adultery in your marriage, not only do you have a lot of pain to deal with and the process of discovery, personal recovery, healing the trauma, grieving the loss, and all that comes with it personally is involved, but you also have a question at some point to answer of, do I want to stay in this marriage? And if the answer is yes, and your spouse is interested in the marriage, the process of reconciliation and recovery and restoration of the marriage is a whole nother process we have to deal with. So in today's video, I sit down again with Kate Conwell of Journey Beyond Betrayal, who leads a community of women who have experienced betrayal in their marriages and shares from her own story of being betrayed in her marriage. And in today's video, we're going to talk about how do you decide, when do you decide whether you want to restore the marriage, and if marriage restoration is the plan, what does that look like to walk forward? That's today on RelationShots. Hey, welcome. I am here with Kate Conwell of Journey Beyond Betrayal. She helps women, or kind of guides a community of women who have experienced betrayal in their marriages to find healing and possible restoration in their relationship. And so we are talking about her journey, and this is kind of video number 2. We did a previous video on the discovery process, the personal journey of healing. And so in this video, we want to talk about if a decision is made to restore the marriage, what does that journey look like? So now we're talking marriage restoration.
Here we go.
Yeah. So take me back to, because one of the things you said in our last video together was you encourage women not to just feel like they got to jump quickly and make a decision. Like, I'm going to be for my marriage or not my marriage. Just sit and allow time. So you've got some reasons for that, but what was your journey of, I'm doing personal healing and now I'm making a marriage decision?
Right. So for me, my husband was immediately like, I want the marriage. Okay. And I was like, I don't know.
Slow down, bro. Yeah, I'm sure.
So I'm not sure, right? Which is what I said in the last video. You don't need to make a decision right away. But what I saw over time was that he actually started to show me that he was serious about wanting to make the marriage work. So he was doing things, he was pursuing his own healing, and he was doing the things that I said, like, okay, I need this, or I need this, or what about this? Like everything that I needed as far as what I was asking him for, he was doing. So I saw some behaviors that were in line with what his words were saying. So once I saw that for enough, enough time to be like, okay, now, like, I'm not in, but I am willing to be with you in working towards restoration. But that doesn't mean we're restored.
Yeah, I'm open to it.
I'm open to this.
Based on what I've seen, one thing you said that hopefully don't glance over it. Not only was he willing to do some of the things you were requesting, whether that was boundaries or transparency or communication, or there's probably a whole list of things, but he was also doing his own work individually, which that's really key. Because sometimes you can do you can put your thumb down so hard on your spouse that they're doing some things to avoid conflict.
Yes.
But they may not have internalized it to the point of going, I want to be healthy and I want to do the right things because the right things are important.
Yeah. I mean, if we can get him to come talk to you, he can share his whole story about, but he was very freed by this discovery coming out. And so he had already been trying to not do these kind of behaviors, and then was now experiencing the consequences. And so was like, I don't want to do this anymore. Yeah. I'm going to fix this because I don't like the person that I was. And so he was highly motivated. And if you hear the last video, we left. So he had lost his family. And
right. Coming home to a house with no wife and kids will make you rethink some things.
Right. So then I had seen that kind of his actions now lining up with his words. Because when you've experienced someone being unfaithful or betraying you, their words and actions weren't lined up. So you need to see some pattern of integrity, even if it's a little bit. At least for me, I was like, okay, I've seen enough, and we'll see if this keeps going. And that's where the marriage restoration began.
So you saw him doing some things. You've been doing your own healing. You got to a place where you said, I am open to the possibility.
Yes.
And then what were you guys doing as a couple?
So at that point, he was meeting with this couple, Paul and Delwyn, and I was meeting with just Delwyn. So they were also part of that process of saying like, I think you're ready now to start working on the marriage if I was willing. And so we had other people that were like walking us through this. And so then they were pivotal in like guiding us through the restoration process for our marriage. And
real quick, what was the time, not that this time length is everybody's time length,
Right.
but for you, what was the time between discovery and you guys' self process before you started being active working on the marriage?
From discovery to that, I would say probably 6 or 8 weeks.
Okay.
And I would say that's fast.
Fast, yeah.
I think that's fast. But if you watch the other video, you'll see I was able to do some things that aren't normal.
Yeah. And again,
And
everybody's different. So like in our situation, my wife had an affair 10 years into our marriage, and we pretty quickly, because we had the right people around us.
Yes.
We had people in our lives. We pretty quickly were doing relational work.
Yeah.
But that some of that was where we were in our walks
Yes.
personally with God, our, my personal health and ability to forgive pretty quick and not have to. So everybody's different, but for you, 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah, I think, for sure. There's a son conceived in that whole thing that helps me remember exactly how long. So also would not recommend that. But,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So 6 to 8 weeks in, you're meeting with kind of got a couple helping guide you. And what'd that process look like?
We would meet, he was meeting with them individually like a couple hours, and we would meet with them together a couple hours every week. I mean, they were like such a godsend. And there's a whole story of like how we even got connected to them. That is just God's hand, like fingerprint over the restoration process, the blessing that they were to us. But they were just like working on, we had to learn how to be married again too.
Yeah.
Part of it was like, we're restoring this marriage, but also like learning how to be married. And for us, that was like, he never really leave and cleave. Like we had not experienced that. Like we didn't know what necessarily like a real Christian marriage like looked like, and how that should operate. And so kind of working on those kind of things simultaneously while it's like, okay, how do we rebuild trust? Like what kind of protections can we put around the marriage to help us prevent this from happening again? How do we communicate with each other? And so they were doing that with us like weekly to help us kind of work through both building, because we were rebuilding our marriage.
You've got one piece is we're trying to restore trust.
Yes.
And once that's restored, you just have trust, and that's a long process,
Yes.
but you would just have trust restored in the crappy marriage you used to have.
Yeah.
So now it's like,
for me, I was not willing.
No.
I'm not doing that.
You got to rebuild trust, and then you also have to say, how do we build a healthy marriage that we both want to be a part of?
Right. And I think that was a huge thing for both of us. I mean, I remember people saying like, oh, if you can get through this, like your marriage will be so much stronger. And like, I do say that to people, and then I'll preface it with like, I know that you don't necessarily want to hear that right now, but like, what I mean is if you really work on this, you will. I mean, to me, I was like, well, why would I be it's going to be stronger or it's going to be dissolved because like, we're not going back to that. And both of us kind of had that mentality of like, we're going to make this something so much better than what it was. It wasn't healthy. Now we know a huge reason why it was unhealthy.
Sure.
So what do we need to do to build a healthy marriage? And part of that is like restoring the trust that was broken and creating, new patterns of behavior so that we can move forward in a healthy way.
Yeah.
While we're doing it with the foundation of like, it's been destroyed, but like a lot of the stuff that we learned in the reconciliation process, really you could learn.
That should have been foundational.
It should have been foundational, yeah. But we didn't have that foundation. I think that's a mistake in a lot of premarital kind of counseling, depending on who you see.
Sure.
It's all about like getting you in the church. It's like getting you married, and then once you're married, it's like here. We kind of felt like it was like here now, you figure it out. Yeah. And there needs to be something
for sure.
like in that. So you understand like we could have figured out that like some of our struggles were not normal.
Yeah.
If we're talking and we have the place to do that. But, and on top of like the infidelity that's happening, which really we couldn't have addressed any of those other things if we didn't address this. And so now it's like, now the marriage is totally broken. We have to fix this. Yeah. So we were more motivated to do that kind of work.
And again, what you're saying is you are now having the depth of conversations that will create a much better marriage than the surfacey, what we don't even know to address and talk about.
And I think that's the key. And that, because I hear so many women as they're working towards reconciliation, the fear is that this is going to happen again. And so you're thinking, well, this happened before, so there's no reason it won't happen again.
Sure.
And it's like that, yes, it could happen again, but there's not no reason it could happen again, because you've changed this about, you've changed X, Y, Z, he's doing this, you're doing this. Your relationship now is totally different if you've if you're doing the work to reconcile. Maybe you're in that process right now and you're still like learning how to do these things, but our marriage, even like, you know, a year, 2 years out from this, looked totally different than our marriage, you know, 2 years before this. And our marriage now, 11 years out, is way different than it was, you know, even 2-3 years out, because we are in a continual process of like developing the skills that we started to develop at that point. And so it's like, am I worried that this could happen to my marriage again? At this point, I'm not, because there's so many things that have changed.
Sure.
And it's like, well, yes, it's the same man. Like, no, it's not, because so much has changed. And I'm not the same woman, and our marriage is not the same. Yeah. And so we learned, you know, how to communicate with each other, like what our roles look like in a marriage where, you know, you hear like the husband is the head and the wife is the supporter. Well, like, what does that really mean, like biblically, and how does that play out in a situation where you have like a really strong, confident woman who like maybe is better at managing the money than he was. So like all those things were a piece of like our reconciliation of like figuring out what does that look like for us, and like how do we talk about these things in an honest way. And now we have two people that are trying to be healthy, trying to create a healthy marriage. So we actually have a shot at it. Yeah. Whereas like, I mean, he would say, if he was sitting here, like that there was no way we could have had a healthy marriage before, because he wasn't being authentic. He wasn't being honest. Sure. While I might have had some of the tools and the skills needed, and was like, obviously I'm an imperfect person, but like he was not capable of doing it because
the stuff he was
living a lie. Yeah. You can't have a strong marriage rooted on a lie.
Right. When one person's living a lie. And I think that's where some of the story of the affair, as we unpack this, there's a process in unpacking the story of the affair to really understand. I think some of that is what gives us confidence that we're not going to repeat that, is to understand, you know, how did that person get there? Yes. Were there, again, I feel like I always have to put a disclaimer in, because nobody's responsible for the affair except the person who decides to step out and do it. Yes. But there may be things in the marriage that provided more environment for the person who has those issues to step out. And so we also have to address, you know, what's going on in the marriage, what do we need to correct in the marriage, not from a standpoint of thinking that prevents, if somebody wants to do something, they're going to do something. But that whole story of how did we get here, what needs to change in the marriage, what is going on with them personally, all that story is part of the process too, I think. Oh, for sure. I mean, and that's like, you're saying it's not, I'm not responsible for him like never cheating on me again, but like if I know that he has this struggle that I can come alongside of, then why would I not want to do that? Yeah. Right? Like, and he does the same for me. It's like the love languages. Like if I know that he feels loved by, like, this is not the truth, but like the presents, like gifts or whatever, or he knows I feel loved by gifts, then like if I just keep spending time with him, he's not going to feel loved. Sure. And so you learn those kind of things, I think, as part of the process of like, how do we really love each other, so that, and how do we show love, and how do we communicate the needs that we have? Because, you know, if you aren't communicating that you're not feeling cared about, or you're feeling insecure, like then how can your spouse doesn't read your mind? Yeah. Like we think, oh, these great marriages are because the husband or wife can like just serve every need perfectly. And I think great marriages are rooted in great communication. Sure.
That's what your channel is all about. There's plenty of videos. Go watch all of his.
and back to the community piece.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it used to be that so much of our relational needs were met in the context of communities, but because we have decided, you know, along with marrying solely for romance and passion, we've also isolated I don't need anybody, me and them against the world.
Yes.
Where we're putting too much weight on our marriages anyway for all the needs that we have that nobody's going to be able to fulfill. So
yes,
that puts us in a difficult position. But I do agree, you can, that's where we're part of each other's healing process, right? If you know our spouse has an area that needs to be healed or an area they deal with, we can either provide an environment that is conducive for that, or we can provide an environment that exasperates it, right? It's like they need words of affirmation. All I am is critical.
Right.
You know, probably at some point they're not going to want to be around me.
Exactly.
If they're not going to want to be around me, it's going to cause disconnection. And at some point they're going to look for somebody to give them words of affirmation.
Yes.
So, you know, we can, again, we can't fill that need, but we can certainly provide an environment that helps it or doesn't help it.
And creates an environment in which you can even have those conversations,
Right.
I think is really important because, I mean, like very recently, I'm like, okay, I can say, this is what I'm feeling. This is like how it impacts me. Like, this is my work to do. I know that this is like, I'm operating out of this fear over here. But like, if you could come alongside me in this way, I could get there faster.
Sure.
Like, it's up to you. Like, you can decide if you want to or not. And I respect it either way. But I at least now like can have the tools to verbalize something like that. Whereas that took a long time to get there.
Absolutely.
Because you have to like understand what you're even feeling, how you're like, why you're feeling that way. And that takes years, but that was a process that started when we were like reconciling, like, why am I feeling this way? What am I feeling? What am I feeling? Why am I feeling this way? And now, like, what responsibility do I have in how I can feel different? Like, if I want something different. And that's like what we learned how to do individually, but then also as a couple as we work towards.
Yeah. And then I like what you're saying is after those steps, how do I communicate that to my spouse that this is what I'm experiencing? I would like you to help facilitate my growth. But if you don't, I got to do it still.
Yes.
Here's a thought. What boundaries did you feel like if you can remember back, that were helpful for you? So I'm thinking about somebody who's watching who, you know, is maybe in the process of reconciling, restoring. I know you made some comment about conceiving, and you know that's often an area, right, where a lot of times people struggle because it's like, well, the last thing I feel like doing is being intimate with somebody who has betrayed me. But then there's also a fear if I'm not intimate with them, maybe they're going to keep going back to this person.
Yeah.
So it puts you in this weird space. But I think for some people, well, certainly when I'm talking to somebody who has revealed an affair recently, you better stop having sex, please, right now. You better go get tested.
Yeah.
You better wait another 6 weeks and go get tested again. You do not need to be having sex because, you know, some of the stuff is life and death. You don't know if they got a disease. But so I'm not necessarily saying there, but were there some boundaries for you that you felt like you needed to set in the restoration process that kind of helped you? Control's the wrong word, but just feel like
protected.
Feel safer.
Yes, I agree with you also about
okay.
And because when I caught him, he wasn't actively engaged, so he took care of that like practical piece of like getting tested and didn't have to repeat it. But that's a whole another. But I agree with that piece of it.
Some people don't.
Yes, I mean, if there's been physical unfaithfulness, unfortunately, that's a very uncomfortable thing, and that's part of what I said earlier, like in another video, like creating safety for yourself, because that is actual, literal, like physical unsafe. A safety there. But some of these things he did on his own, and some of these things were things I actually asked for. But he deleted all social media accounts.
Okay.
He deleted all female phone numbers from his phone, because one of the things he had shared was like he would put these fish hooks out to people that weren't like overtly like hey, do you want to like hang out with me, but like some kind of flirtatious. And so he deleted, like if any woman was in his phone, I had approved it. And so that was another thing that he did. And I would say these were things he kind of did as before we even got to the point of like, these were things he did to show me he was like serious. And then I put in some requests, like, which these wouldn't be boundaries. They were just like things like, okay, I want you to start texting me every night before you go to bed, one thing that you love about me or you appreciate about me, kind of to help me know that you are committed to this, like, and also just like help him recognize, like, what is it?
Sure. And
like,
he's pursuing you, and he's thinking about you.
Yeah. Which was a piece of like our reconciliation process too, was they advised us, like, you have to pursue her again. Like, this is a courtship, which goes back to like, I was not committed to making the marriage. So you have to pursue her. And that was one of the ways he did that. I think, and I can't like exactly remember the timeline in which we in like put these things into effect, but like if he was, as time went on and he was like messaging some other women, it was like I was always included in that, or like even now, which it wasn't back then, but like now if I'm messaging like another man, I include him, or like we communicate about that. He cut out alcohol for like a year because that was a part of like the really bad decisions that he made.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then
alcohol is a part. If alcohol was eliminated,
yes.
We wouldn't need to talk about consent on college campuses.
No.
Murder rates would drop. I mean, it's connected to everything. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was definitely connected to his physical affairs, not necessarily the like texting or pornography side of things, but he did. But
the inhibition
allowed it to go
Absolutely.
further. And then from there, it was like he couldn't drink if I wasn't present. You know, so some of these things like stepped themselves. They started like cut it out completely, and then it's like, okay, now ease back into it, and then we'll see what happens from there. And so there were some things that we did like that, and just kind of ways to protect our marriage. So for us, like, it happened too when he was traveling or like secretly, but we didn't have opportunity. We didn't have to, there were some things we didn't really need to create boundaries around because they weren't even, now it wasn't even an opportunity. Like, we're living together, we're working together. We're not like, he's not going on these track trips, traveling without me. And so some of those things like happened naturally. Whereas there's times now where I was like, oh, if we were dealing with this right now in a job where he is out communicating with other people, we would have had to have a lot more boundaries. But because like we were in a job together, and then like the job he went and got, like there was only men involved. He worked at Par Lumber. There's like only men, and like even the customers are mostly men. So we're not like, I'm not concerned about him going to work and like maybe doing something. There were certain things that I think I didn't have to set boundaries around, but I would. Like if we were right now and this happened and he was in the job he was in, like we would have to figure out some ways for him to be able to communicate with women that I felt comfortable with. But that wasn't part of our process, but that's part of like what I help women do is like, okay, if he has to communicate with women, how do you protect that? But with boundaries, what are you in control of? Only yourself. So you can't say like, you have to do this. You just have to say, this is what I need to feel safe. And if this doesn't happen, this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And so we did that with like different pieces of the way he had broken trust. For me, had different like boundaries. Like the physical affair, I was like, okay, if you're ever physical, I'm out. Like that's my line here. Okay, if you're watching pornography, like I'm probably going to need some time, like space from you before I feel safe again. Like if you're messaging other women, like I'm probably going to like need even more space. So it depended on like what I would need, but it was very clear. I very clearly communicated, if this happens, then this is what's going to happen. If this happens, like this is what's going to happen. And I think that's one thing. We go to either like all or nothing in our boundaries. And there's like, that's not a boundary. That's called your line in the sand.
Yeah. And
the boundaries are like, you can create those to protect your marriage in so many ways, depending on what breaches of trust there have been. And so it looks a little bit different, but ours kind of were around the ways he had broken trust. And so like, what did we need to do to protect the marriage from that being able to happen again? It's like we talk about with your candy. Like it's a lot easier to grab a piece of candy when it's right there in front of you. Like, that reminds me. So he had like covenant eyes on his phone.
Sure.
so that was a thing, and his reports would go to someone else. So there was other people involved in our accountability as well. And he was in. Now it's all coming back. I just gotta go to the candy. I remember the candy.
Yeah, you've been removed a while.
He was in a group, and that was another thing. Like, he needs to be in his group, and if he missed his group multiple times, like, I can't remember now exactly what it was, but it's like there were things we designed. Like, you need to, if you're missing your group, then this would happen. If you and so those kind of things that we set out. People think boundaries are there to like control. They're not control. They're there to protect.
They're healthy line markers of, also determining who owns the responsibility. And so for you guys, the boundaries were unique to, I think there's some general ones obviously, but unique to what you needed, and also unique to where he struggled to help him not, because it makes no sense to play right on the edge of fire and then wonder why I got burned a little bit. Might as well come back a little bit where I've got some room to not be great and still not fail.
Especially in the beginning, because it's like he was just at the beginning of his work. He didn't understand necessarily all the reasons why he was doing it, but he was just like, I know I'm gonna like, if I don't have the opportunity to watch pornography, or I know that if I do, this guy's gonna get an email about it.
Sure.
Like, then there's a little bit of external motivation, and now it's like he's retrained his brain enough, like he doesn't necessarily need, but he still has it.
Sure.
My kids are for sure going to have those kind of protections on their devices as well, because we want to protect them from the same kind of things.
And that's probably a whole nother video.
Yes, we could come back and we'll
our kids
round
could
three.
Be exposed to. So, just to recap, the journey of marriage restoration, obviously you need to make a decision. Forgiveness, which we talked about in the other videos, a part of that process. But, some of it is boundaries. Some of it is getting the right people around you to help you walk through the process and figure out what are the things we need to craft. And some of it was just establishing for the first time a healthy foundation for marriage, because you guys didn't even have that thing going in. And then it's just a commitment. So I like what you said about really seeing part of seeing your husband doing the things on his own that were necessary for his personal growth is what opened your heart to be like, okay, now I can be open to see if we together can restore something like that. So do this for me. If somebody's watching and she needs help and community, where can she find you?
Thank you for asking. She can find me at journeybeyondbetrayal.com. I'm on social media, Journey Beyond Betrayal, Facebook, Instagram. It's very easy. One place, Journey Beyond Betrayal.
No, that's good. That's good. So the reality is we're not supposed to do this alone. So whatever community you may have, because sometimes people have community, but it may not be the right community for this situation and season. And so don't do it alone. You're going to need some people, and the people around you will speed up greatly the process of whatever that looks like. And the goal is not to just get through it, but having the right people with the right conversations and the right support will speed up the grieving, the healing, and possibly the restoration process.
And I think it's important too for everyone to hear, like, both of us in our individual stories are examples of marriages that can get through this when both people are committed to doing their individual work and committed to restoring the marriage. So there is hope on the other side of this, even though when you're walking through it, you're like, how in the world am I? I would not, as much as I like had a vision and knew what I wanted, like, how much growth I've experienced? Would you say the same in your marriage?
Absolutely. And it's one of those things I think a lot of people say, I wouldn't want to go experience the pain again, but the marriage I got after it, I actually would go through it again. Yes.
I don't know if there's any other way. Once you get through the really painful stuff and you like see now, like, we're many years beyond it, like, I don't know how else we could have gotten here. And even as an individual, like
Sure.
how I could have gotten here,
Yeah.
or how he could have.
That doesn't mean I'm
together.
interested in doing it again.
No, and I've drawn the line.
You know what? I could get even more growth if we experience it again.
God gives us other ways of growing. You know?
I'll be proactive in my own growth,
Yes.
so God doesn't have to stir this up to help my
Yes,
growth.
yeah. I'm like, just do something else. You know? And
Thanks for sharing your story. Thanks for giving us input and advice. I think it's going to help a lot of people, so thank you for being here.
thank you for having me. I hope it brings hope.
It will.
To others.
All right. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time. Bye.